It might help if I had my microphone on when I started this. So today we're going to go over the 6-6 graded assignment for world history. It's about writing a letter to either the Japanese emperor, the Chinese emperor or the Japanese shogun. And I'm going to walk you through how we're going to do this. It does show on your calendar that it is due today, but it is not. Technically, you have until the Sunday following the due date to get it in, and that Sunday is not until after we come back from break. So we come back on a Monday. It's not due till that following Sunday. Keep that in mind. Don't stress. We'll go through it. So this is the graded assignment. It is worth 50 points. Yes, I repeat again, it is worth 50 points. 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 I know you guys get tired of that, but keep that in mind because 50 points can make or break your grade. 50 is a lot of points, and there are very few things in your course that are worth this much, so make sure you are doing these assignments. You need to imagine that you are an advisor to either China's emperor or Japan's shogun. Write a letter advising the ruler whether you support a policy of isolation or engagement. Remember, we talked about the Ming and Qing dynasties and how they, towards the end there, were isolated. They no longer wanted to trade with people. They didn't want to have any contact with outside cultures. They wanted to stick to themselves. End of story, no outside influence or trade. That is isolation. Engagement is encouraging that trade, encouraging that exchange of cultures and ideas. So you have to decide whether or not you think the Chinese emperor or the Japanese shogun should engage with other cultures or if they should isolate themselves and have no contact with the outside world. You're going to explain your reasons for supporting that policy. Your letter. Remember, you're writing a letter to them, so you're going to start with dear or to China's emperor, to Japan's shogun. You're going to write 3 paragraphs at least. You have to have a minimum of 3 paragraphs. 3. It can be no less than 3. And remember, a paragraph has to have at least 3 to 5 sentences in each in order to be considered a paragraph. So make sure you're getting your full thoughts out there. Each paragraph has to discuss one reason for supporting or opposing isolation. So if you choose that you want to encourage the Chinese emperor to be isolated, you need to pick 3 reasons why. And then in your paragraphs, you're going to explain why for each paragraph. So you pick 3 reasons, 1 reason in each paragraph, then explain. Let's break this down. So you're imagining that you're an advisor. You have to pick. It's either China's emperor or Japan's shogun. They're 2 different cultures, 2 different worlds. Consider what we've learned so far in the lessons to help you make a decision about which one you feel the most confident in speaking to. You're going to write a letter. So think about how you start and end a letter. That is what you're going to be doing in this case. You're putting yourselves in the shoes of an advisor. You are important to the Chinese emperor or to the Japanese shogun, and you are going to advise them politically on whether or not they should be isolated or engage with other cultures. You need to explain your reasons for supporting that policy. And again, your letter needs to be 3 paragraphs minimum, and each paragraph has to have a reason for why you're supporting or opposing isolation. This is the rubric. You guys have seen it. The rubric never changes. This is the same one we use for all of our grading assignments. You have to have a response that is relevant and historically accurate to earn enough points. You also have to provide complete explanations and details. If you provide less than 3 paragraphs, you're already going to be out of this 41 to 50 range. And you have to demonstrate a thorough understanding of the topic. So you can't just say that you want them to be isolated because you're afraid that if they get too much exposure to other cultures, they'll have a sucker addiction problem and they won't be able to help themselves from eating too many Dum-Dum Pops. Okay, that is not relevant, and it doesn't help me see that you actually understand what the heck we're talking about. Keep that in mind. So what do we already know? You can see that half of this is filled out and half of it is not. We talked about the Ming and Qing dynasties, and I want you to fill in this other half of the slide. What do we know about China, about their time when they engaged with other cultures and then when they were isolated? Japan is the new one that you learned about today, so I filled in some of this information for you. We know Japan has a shogun. He holds most of the power, owned all of the precious metal, and more than 1/4 of the cultivated land in Japan. And you need to understand what a daimyo is, because those are important aristocrats in Japanese culture. As far as European influence, the Europeans introduced firearms to Japan, and the shoguns at the time took advantage of this because there was a lot of infighting in Japan. So they were warring against each other, different groups within Japan. So when these firearms were introduced, the more powerful shoguns used the firearms quickly to overrun and take over the other groups. There were some peaceful years after Japan was united under one shogun. Their trade and economy expanded even with other cultures, and some merchants actually became wealthier than even the daimyo. There were some changes in education, art, and literature. Many people were literate, means they could read, and they wanted to read. So novels, historic fiction, and poetry were in really high demand. The people wanted those. They needed access to them. Rich city dwellers also demanded art and entertainment. This is where theater and painting really grows within the Japanese culture. But then we move into isolation. And in 1614, the shogun orders all of the daimyo to renounce Christianity. They're not allowed to practice Christian religion. They also banned nearly all trade with Europeans and forbade Japanese ships to sail abroad. They could only be in Japanese water. We saw this with the Chinese as well. In the 1630s, they further regulated Japan to keep it isolated and prohibited people from leaving. And if you left Japan, you were not welcome back. So these could be different ways to help you approach your reasons for supporting or opposing isolation in Japan if you chose it. Make sure you fill out some information about China so you could decide if you'd rather write about how you could propose sticking with isolation or opening the doors and becoming more engaged with other cultures to the emperor. Here's what you need to do next. You're going to complete the exit ticket on the next slide, and then you need to begin working on the letter for the 6-6 graded assignment. It's really, really easy. A lot of it is opinion-based. You just have to use some facts from your book to help back up your opinion, and you know how to write a letter. You know how you would expect to receive a letter from someone and how a letter would look if you were to give it to someone. So use that to your advantage. This is not an essay. It is a letter. It is you advising, say, me, if you're considering me the shogun or the emperor, you're advising me to either remain isolated and block all exchanges between other countries, or to open my doors and allow trade and exchange of goods and ideas within my country. If you have questions, as always, submit those via K-mail because we're not in a live lesson so that I can help you. At the top here is your exit ticket. You can copy, paste, click on it, or type this into your URL. That way you can get access to the survey, whatever works for you. Make sure you complete it, otherwise you're not going to get credit for having viewed the recording, and I will not know that you are prepared to begin this assignment. Thank you so much, and I will see you guys after break.